All right, folks, good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the Saturday edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show on AM 830 WCRN. I'm Joe Mangiacotti, and behind the board today is Russ. Good morning, Russ. How are you, sir? Excellent. It wasn't that bad of a ride in, folks. The streets were fine. Well, let me put it this way. I have a four-wheel drive, so if I didn't hit a couple of times, I think it would have been a problem, but, Route 9 in a major way was pretty good. I thought it was going to be a little worse. We watched some incredible ice storms and snow, especially to our neighbors in the south who just aren't equipped for it. They're not ready for it, Russ, right? They don't have the plows, they don't have the knowledge, they don't even have the shovels and the snow removing equipment that we're used to. No, we didn't get it. Something, yeah. Around here, I think we call that a dusting. So we're going to get into that. We'll talk a little bit about Texas, the situation with the energy there, what's going on, and even the Senator Cruz situation. But let's do some housekeeping stuff first. 508-871-7000 to join the conversation. That's 508-871-7000. Lines are open and available, so join us at will. We also have our text line, which is 617-297-8388, 617-297-8388. You can text that like you text anybody and send a comment in, a question, and it's one way to communicate while we're in the air. We find out a lot of people like to do that. They don't have to call in. You know, Rush, you've been in and around radio for a long time, and less than like 1/2 of 1% of people who listen to talk radio ever actually call in. And then when I meet some of you and you go, oh, I listen all the time, and when you said this, I was yelling at the radio or whatever, pick up the phone. I mean, that's part of the show. The show was kind of a creation out of the old Tea Party radio. It was Mike Wade decided to keep it going, and we rebranded it. And he reached out to me at that time and said, I've never done radio. I need someone to come along with me on this and teach me how to do radio and all the other stuff in it. And I think the guy that used to be on here on a regular, John Weston, I think was responsible for actually suggesting that we call it conservatively speaking in the beginning. So, but the premise of this show has always been the people's microphone, an open microphone, a venue, an ability for the average person to get their thoughts out there, get it off their chest. I know you tune in here to listen to, the news that I go over you can find anywhere, but I think you look for a forum that you can, A, find some like-minded people, B, express your opinion, C, maybe hear what Mike's take used to be or what my take is these days, and of course of our guests. But 508-871-7000. And that kind of actually segues, I think, into the first thing that I need to say today and talk about, and that's the passing of Rush Limbaugh earlier in the week on Ash Wednesday. A guy who changed radio in a lot of ways. He was 70 years old. He just celebrated his 7th birthday a couple months ago in January, actually. And he announced about a year ago, Christmas time, that he was diagnosed with lung cancer. And now we find out that it was a lot more aggressive than, anybody wanted to say publicly or lead on. And even when he went to the State of the Union address to receive the Medal of Honor for Civilian Medal of Honor, he was in Boston, actually. So he was up here at Dana-Farber and getting treatment, like people do from all over the world. They come to Boston. There are fantastic hospitals throughout the country and in other parts of the world, no question about it. But when you think about cutting-edge medical treatment and where do you go when you have a life-ending illness, it's usually one of the Boston hospitals. And Rush was in Boston. And they talked to him and did give him a heads up what they were going to announce. And I don't think that they actually told him they were gonna do it at it, but that he needed to be there for the announcement. And so he did get up, get out of the hospital here, out of his treatment here in Boston, and he went down to DC for the State of the Union to receive that medal. And First Lady Melania Trump, put it on him, we all remember that. But Rush Limbaugh, he was something that was a bit of a phenomenon, and he changed the understanding of talk radio in a lot of ways. Just my personal experience, Rush was in radio long before, he was in radio when he was 15, he got his first gig in radio. I don't think I was even born yet, to tell you the truth. I think it was like 1957 or something like that. But he wanted to do it. He just knew this is what he wanted to do. He took a break from it. He thought this was something he wanted to do. And he has said in interviews and when he's talked to people, hey, I thought I failed. I thought I tried, I thought I failed. And radio is a very interesting business for those of you that have never experienced it or been in it. I've always joked that there's only 100 of us in the business, and we just keep moving around from station to station, because you meet and you get to know the same people in the business of over 20, 30 years, and this is 35 years or something for me. But so he went off to work, I think, for the KC Royals or something in baseball, and he went back into radio, and he was doing radio in a local station in '87. And what happened in that time, folks, if you don't know what went on, but Ronald Reagan, who is one of the best presidents we've ever had, not just because he was Republican, or conservative, because he did great things. He did some stupid things too, our presidents do. But he did do a lot of deregulation, and that allowed businesses to flourish and grow. And one of the things that went away under the Trump administration was something called the Fairness Doctrine. And that was simply, it was the left's way of saying, well, you can't go on there and have all this time on your conservative views, you got to give us equal time. So that meant that if someone went on and they were deemed to be conservative talk for a 2-hour 2-hour show, the station had to go out and find somebody to do a 2-hour liberal point of view. Now there's a couple things wrong with that. Honestly, they couldn't sell a lot of the liberal shows. If we look back at talk radio and how many times liberal shows tried to make it, they couldn't make it. And it was one of those things that the more conservative shows, were working for the radio stations. But I'm digressing here a little bit. So the Fairness Doctrine went away, and he became syndicated in 1988. And it was a daytime show, and it was a talk show in a format that hadn't been tried, and nobody wanted to try it. And that was really have no guests, to just go on straight 3 hours and talk about his opinions and how he looked at things. And it worked. It worked. And he just quickly added, I think his network went to 650 stations. I'm sure it fluctuated. Then he was exposed to cancel culture before that was a phrase, before we knew what it was even. He used to say I have a PhD in liberalism, and he would explain the extreme left's mentality and MO, the modus operandi, and how not just to win arguments, but the ammunition to win those arguments. But he was a guy that changed radio, and I want to say, I got to tell you something. The comments in the unadulterated just hatred and vile that came out on social media on Wednesday and Thursday was so sad, because it's a commentary on us. And I gotta tell you, you gotta remember something, folks. Those people that are writing those vile, horrible things about Rush Limbaugh they're writing them about you too, or at least most of you. Most of you who listen to this show and similar type shows and have similar thoughts and conservative viewpoints, they're talking to you as well. So let's make that clear and get that straight. They're using Russia as the vehicle to point it all at, but they're talking about you. And the comments that came out were disgusting. And over the years that Donald Trump was in the political scene, and people I know, people I thought were friends of mine, I mean, they would wish death upon Donald Trump. They wish death upon Rush Limbaugh. Wishing death on somebody, how do you get worse than that? No matter how much I disagreed with whether it was Barack Obama and even George W. or George H. or George W. didn't matter, or Bill Clinton, at no point would it ever occur to me to wish death to them or harm to them. I wish they'd lose an election. I wish that they would lose their legislation in the vote in the House or the Senate. I would wish these things, yeah. That's politics. But to make it personal with that hate and that wish of death, folks, it's a sad comment on our society, but it really says more about you than anything Rush Limbaugh ever said or did. So I really just had to kind of get that off my chest, because if you're wishing death upon somebody because you don't like their political views, and more importantly, the case with Rush Limbaugh is you can never win a point-for-point debate with a guy. That's all on you. As he used to say, half my brain tied behind my back. Or the one that would really send people over the edge. Talent on loan from God. I used to think that actually was very humbling. Because when you think about it, he's saying that his talent isn't his. It's on loan from God. And isn't all of our talents on loan from God? Or your higher being? So I don't fault him for that. It's not blasphemy. He's not taking the Lord's name in vain. He's saying, my talent, what I'm doing here, is through the grace of God that I have this ability to do this. As he used to say, high atop the EIB building. And people used to go to New York trying to figure out where the EIB building was. And like so many other things, it was just where he was broadcasting from. It's like Air Force One is whatever aircraft the president's riding in. That becomes, it's a designation. But I did borrow that over the years. When I was doing the financial show, I would say, from the Money Matters studios, high atop the Armstrong Towers, and here I've said it, from the CRN studios, high atop the Carberry Towers. And that was ingrained into me 30 years ago from Rush Limbaugh. I borrowed it. I think many of us in radio borrowed it from time to time. But anyway, if you'd like to comment on Rush Limbaugh, that's fine. But I'm telling you now, if you have anything negative, or if you want to tell me that he was horrible, not the time, not the venue, put it in a note. I don't want to hear it. 508-871-7000. Let's go to the phones. Scott's been waiting first. All right, we'll go to Scott down in Florida. Scott, good morning. Thanks for listening. You're up nice and early. How are things in Florida? It's a little warmer, I'm suspecting, than here. Well, you're in a lot of good company. There's a lot, Scott. Matter of fact, Scott, I was just looking, let me see if it's in my notebook, because I know I wrote it down, because it was kind of interesting that Massachusetts, it was a ridiculous number. It was like 87% of people who have moved out of Massachusetts have relocated to Florida. That's the #1 destination for people transferring or migrating out of this cold New England Taxachusetts. Has to do with the weather, Scott, but it also has a lot to do with the taxes and the lifestyle. And you can have a little nicer lifestyle for less money in Florida than you can in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Yeah. Yeah. Well, two things. One is, I heard that call, and I was coming out of the post office, the main post office in Worcester, and I just got out back in the truck, and Limbaugh was on, and I heard your voice first, and I'm like, I know that voice, and then I think you said something, and I was pretty sure it was you. But that's funny. So yeah, I heard that call to Rush Limbaugh. But the other thing is, as I was saying at the top of the show, now we found out, he was a lot worse off than we thought. In the times that we heard him on the radio, and he didn't sound like he was in that much pain and that ill, but he was, and he was expected to go at least 4 months ago. I mean, they didn't think the fact that he made it to October was flooring the doctors, but the president said in his first interview on Fox that he was telling him that he wanted to make it to the election. He was really pushing, he wanted to see the 2020 election, and that's what he was fighting for. But yeah, he was a lot more sick than anyone let on. Yep. Yep. Yeah. Right. Scott, that's a very good point, because this new form of left out there, they've used these terms so frequently and to apply to people that aren't. And what that has done, it's taken the power away from it. It's made it more. It's made it a caricature on them, because when they call people racists and bigot because they don't like them and they don't like their point of view of their argument, which is not written, which basically usually is not racist, has nothing to do with race, but it's that, as they say, Scott, the trump card. They go right to the racism card, and they call it, I'm accused of my own sister being a racist because I'm a conservative. And she thinks what I do here right now is horrible. It pisses her off that I have a radio show and that I, talk from a conservative point of view. But I get it in my own family. But you're right. They've lost the impact of the word, because they've used it as a weapon And they've used it when it's inappropriate, when it doesn't apply. And once that has become a norm, it means nothing anymore, folks. I hate to tell you this, but it's still a horrible thing, to call somebody a racist. It's one of the lowest things you can call somebody. If it's true, that's on them. When you use it in the way it's used today, that's on you. Yeah. Yeah. Everybody, Scott, you're right. Everybody has a label, and everybody wants to get you. We've become this culture of we've got you. Everything you do is going to be judged. And what amazes me is that multi-billion-dollar corporations are being swayed by some jamoke on Twitter with 68 followers, and they say, you know, when they say, well, people are trending on Twitter, saying on Twitter, really? I think back and I'm wondering if you were to take a board of directors from a business from 20 or 30 years ago and say your company direction and policy is going to be determined by some chuckleheads who can type up 40 characters and send it out on this internet and appear on people's screens, what would they have said to you? They would have said, no, I think we're going to run our board the way we see fit. But do they? I'm just amazed at corporate America and how much they can be pushed around by social media. Well, you're not alone in that, Scott, and there are a lot of people who are in that boat, and they think, they're faithful Catholics, and they're waiting for Jesus. They've been taught to wait for Jesus Christ or the Savior to show up. So it's not a bad thing to say at all. It's something that I think a lot of people feel that way. But as far as end times, I hope not. I think things are bleak, and we have a president and administration that seem to be undoing the policies and directives that were so good for this country. And when Joe Biden says we're back and we're going to be involved, at no time will we ever isolationists. And I got to tell you something, as far as the UN goes, Donald Trump said to the UN, we're not on our own. He made us the strongest military on the planet again. And he said, I just want to make sure everybody understands that. Just understand that. And for those of you who think that you don't have to pay your dues to the UN and everybody's going to be there for you, I got news for you. It doesn't work that way. You got to pay your dues. $480 billion came in because Donald Trump said it's not going to be like that anymore. You want to be on the world stage and you want to play in the world arena and with the big boys, then you belly up to the table and you pay your dues and you participate and you behave correctly. And his way of handling Iran is to say, behave. And what I'm going to do is we're going to strike up these understandings with all the nations around you and bring in economic trade and make them strong, and you're going to come to the table because you have no other option. And Biden's on doing that, and we're going back to the days of pallets of cash being sent over there hoping that they're going to like us. They're going to like us. Here's my lunch money. Will you please like me now? Joe Biden, I don't know, you would think with corn pop and all his stories about school growing up that he would know how a bully works. Thank you for the call, Scott. Always appreciate it. Let me go to Worcester, Mark in Worcester first. Good morning, Mark. Thanks for holding on for so long. You look marvelous. What's on your mind? There you go. Thank you. Mega Dittos. Yep, you got it, man. Yep. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's true. And let me say this, at no time has this station brought pressure on me like that you can't talk about that or whatever. Now, some people, no, I get that, I get that. I get that. I'm just saying that, but there are a lot of guys like me only on a couple stations, in local areas. And they're getting pressure at some of these stations, Mark. Yeah, yeah, of course they are. Mark, let me do this because I'm against the clock. I can't. If you want, you're welcome to hold on, and you can pick it up on the other side, folks. We're going to take a quick break here in the Joe Mangiacotti Show for the first segment of the first hour. Come back with the second segment of the first hour. 508-871-7000 to join the conversation. I'm Joe Mangiacotti. All right, folks, welcome back to the second half of the first hour of the Saturday edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show, AM 830, WCRN, our affiliates, as well as live streaming on the TuneIn app. Just punch in WCRN, take us anywhere. Even tell Alexa, play WCRN, she'll do that. We're also live streaming on our Facebook page, Joe Mangi Show, M-A-N-G-I, Joe Mangi Show. That is our social media tag for everything, Facebook and Twitter, and yes, Parler. Parler is back up and running, by the way, folks. They have a new interim president of Parler. And what they did is, it was the AWS, right? Amazon Web Services. A lot of people don't realize just how huge AWS is. We think of Amazon as the front end of the store and the packages and all that started out as a bookstore. But Bezos was, yeah, pretty much a genius, and he went to the web service, the hosting, right, the servers for all of this traffic, how much they handle, and they were able to, with ease, censor and shut Parler off down, right off, because Bezos kowtowed to and bowed to the pressure of that ilk, and they went around him. So they worked it out with. And I'm not going to pretend to be an expert here, but I saw an interview with the interim president. Basically, my understanding is that they've created a stack system of servers that can't be flipped off with one switch, and they're back up and running. So if you had Parler, you can go on, and it will be activated again. You're going to have to re-sign in and so forth, but it's back up there and running. Now, I don't know where you go to get it, though. Maybe I'll try to find that out for you. Anyway, Mark is on the line with us, and I know you're about to move into Texas, and that's very convenient because the next area that I wanted to get into, Mark, is the Texas crisis going on. The latest I saw was somewhere around 60 deaths are being attributed to the weather, not just in Texas, but through that swath of country. 13 million people under boiled water to drink, but power is starting to come back on. Temperatures are warming up, so that is a good situation. But a lot of this deals with the fact that Texas is in its own power grid and has this power grid, and what that means is that they're not connected to the rest of the country in the same way that they can then pull power from somewhere else. So that is a problem for them, but I have some thoughts on that. But anyway, Mark, let me bring you back into the conversation. And
Yeah, what I wanted to say is that people don't pay very close attention to what happens in Texas, because I hate to tell you what happens in Texas can happen anywhere. We're living in a brave new world. We're all set to cross. We're not living in the old United States. We're living in the new United States. A new reality where anything is possible, unfortunately. So the people of Texas are suffering power outages, no power at all, for days, rolling blackouts, food shortages, change of supplies goes down, farming the food closed, and water contamination. So what people might want to think about is getting a 90-day supply, non-perishable food, maybe some kind of electrical generator, and a water filtration. If the water's contaminated, you can decontaminate it, cook your food, and have water to drink. Now, people will say, well, I'm not a prepper.
Yeah.
I'm not a conspiracy theorist. What's going on in Texas is not a theory, it's reality.
yeah, exactly. And look at Mark, right? We've seen in the last, just in recent history, right, Katrina, and what was the one in Jersey, New York? Andrew, right? Andrew. So Katrina, what it did to Louisiana. Andrew, what it did to New York. I mean, we're talking New York, right? The lower Manhattan, the streets were flooded. People had to flee out of the city. Power was gone. Food was gone. Yeah.
Keep your eye on China and the island of
Yes, I've been saying
I'm
that.
gonna think that before the year is out, they're gonna go to the Taiwanese government and they're gonna say, we're giving you an ultimatum. You do this the easy way, or we're gonna do it the hard way. Now, I'm talking about a physical, invasion of the island. If they do not capitulate, and I'm telling you right now, if our military puts one finger to stop them, you think you got rolling blackouts now? You think you got shortages now? China is gonna pull the plug, okay, on our chain supply. So we're gonna call that, I don't care when you pick up, put this there on the fact made in China, okay? And not only that, they have provisions for the Iranians that are do nothing but hack. They're gonna hack into our control system, drop us to the right here in the United States. That's another thing that we gotta worry
Yeah.
about and take into consideration, because they will do it if we lift one finger.
Yeah.
Say Taiwan. Have a good one, brother.
All right, thank you, Mark. Always a good call. Geez, Mark, you think you listen to the show on a regular basis. I have been talking about Taiwan for a long time now, folks. And if you listen to this show, or you listen to me with Jerry Doherty on Political Thursdays and Making Money Last, you've heard me over and over again tell you that we have to pay attention to Taiwan. And Taiwan, which fancies themselves independent of China, yet still is considered a republic of China, that's where there's going to be a problem. Because China has been very, well, I was going to say quietly, they're not quietly, they're blatantly, right under America's nose, right under the world's nose, adding real estate. What they've done to India, building islands, literally building islands in the ocean. Then what they've done to Hong Kong. Now, Taiwan has been operating how they feel independently of China. And America has an agreement with Taiwan to protect them, to be their ally. We have been providing them with technology, military technology in defense systems. And China has intentions of bringing Taiwan closer to them, more under the fold, and bringing the same level of surveillance to Taiwan that they have in the rest of China, including Hong Kong. Now, when Joe Biden gets up there and talks about, he says, I had a 2-hour conversation with the president of China, what does that mean, Joe? Is that a good thing? Because I can tell you, Donald Trump wouldn't be having a 2-hour conversation. Donald Trump would have maybe a 15-minute conversation. Because I'm telling you, the president of China wouldn't want to be on the phone longer than that with Trump. But if anything we've learned from the situation with the coronavirus was how much, and this is something that people have been talking about a long time, and we've had Dr. Fedawar on before, and we've talked about this. He was a guy who got involved with the alarming us to the fact that our supply chains in vital components of things that aren't on our soil, that we have to bring into the country, and that we need to change that supply line. We need to have more supplies on our soil, within our boundaries, and to be manufactured here, and to keep the technology in the country. And Mark, you're right. You're right. If China ever wanted to mess with us, it's not going to be Red Dawn, the first Red Dawn, not the remake of Red Dawn, that we're going to come with paratroopers flying into Seattle in the West Coast or something. They have been in our country working for generations. Swalwell, Fanfan, right? Her, And the other one, Weinstein, the one with the driver, was a Chinese spy for 20 years. What did he hear in that car? What did he hear hanging around that office? But Pelosi in that ilk of the Democratic Party, not all Democrats, but that clueless bunch up there, they just don't think that there's anything wrong here. They have no problem with this. We've had, a professor arrested right here in Massachusetts, right, working to set up the lab in China, at Wuhan. What was it, $70,000 a month or so ridiculous? He's hiding. That's one problem right there. But the point is, China has been working to become the #1 power on the planet for a long time. And they're not going to achieve it without harming the United States. Now we have an administration whose family is so intertwined with China, and we've seen this, right? Mark Cuban. That jamoke stops playing the national anthem. Fortunately, the blowback from NBA and so forth was enough, but all that has to do is the NBA, it depends on China so much for money. You can always bring it back to the money, folks. This isn't where I was planning to go in this segment of the show, but Mark brings up a good point. And yes, what's happening in Texas right now is a micro look at what can happen when things break down. Now, the deal that they have in China with this electric committee, right, that they do this, they do it a little different in China. Sorry, they do it a little different in Texas, where they have their own power. Now, what doesn't make sense to me is that Texas having an issue with power is like starving in a supermarket. It makes no sense, folks. Right? China, what? You got China in my head. You know China. Texas, right, has oil. They've always had no problem with it. But there's been this push, and we go back in Perry, right, the former governor, and then Secretary of Energy. He signed off on some of this stuff, but they moved their percentages away from coal and oil and using wind and soil, wind and solar. What's wrong with that? Point is, listen to what I'm telling you. Wind and solar are fantastic supplemental, right? They're there, they're great. Say wind provides 4% of the power. You have to look at it this way. That's wonderful that it replaces 4% of what oil or fossil fuels, well, let's use fossil fuels just to talk about gas, oil, and all that, right? Fossil fuels. You have to look at it in a positive sense. That's fantastic that we've been able to get 4% of our power off of fossil fuels. You can't flip a switch. AOC, let me tell you something. Her tweeting out that this is a great example of why the Green New Deal needs to be here is mind-blowing. AOC, what the heck are you talking about? You clearly don't understand what you're talking about. Look, at solar and wind are great to have where you can have it and let it take some of the pressure off of fossil fuels. But no, we cannot flip a switch at midnight tonight and go from 88% of our power grids and equipment being run by fossil fuels to solar and wind. And the excuses of Florida, of China, of Texas, are convoluted because initially the wind turbines froze because nobody wanted to invest in the anti-icing technology for the wind turbines. Hey, why do that? We're in Texas. Nothing's not going to freeze. Yeah, once every 100 years or so, you're going to get the cold snap. That's hindsight, not gonna do any good. But the surge, and when they went from this huge amount of electricity being, coming from the from the wind, them freezing, and they dropped down, and that's why I'm going through my notebook here, because I have the breakdown of that. But it went down to a ridiculous at 4%, a huge drop. Texas on an average week, right, or average day, it's 89,000 kilowatts of power used. And there's drops, so the surge that was created on the other fossil fuel equipment caused a breakdown there, because all of a sudden there was this incredible demand of power. Once, you have the power stream taken away because of the windmills, then you have the fact that the cold snap is there with the weather, and people are draining the system, pulling from the system to heat their homes, heat their farms, right? This is the other problem. Livestock has to be kept alive. Also, this is the time of year calves are born. It's just like a perfect storm of all this stuff coming in together. Now, why other states around Texas can't jump in there and get some power to them, I don't understand. We're shipping tons of generators, that's fine. But this to me clearly illustrates that for the next foreseeable future, for the next several decades, and Al Gore and Kerry are coming out now, the new number, 9 years. We have 9 years to save the planet now. Notice how that goalpost gets changed all the time. We cannot get rid of fossil fuel in a matter of years or even decades. Just start working on the technology, improving the technology for alternative ways, and combine them with fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are in the planet, they're natural. And nuclear power is green energy. And we can debate that issue. I know it's gotten this bad PR, but it's clean. And we do have the issue of, yes, disposing, but uranium is naturally occurring in nature too. 508-871-7000. Let me go to the phones. Joanne in North Brookfield's been holding patiently. Joanne, thank you for holding. Sorry about the tantrum there, but good morning. You look marvelous.
I just want to say, I agree with you totally. I mean, it's one fraudulent lie after another. This whole Green New Deal is so insane. What we saw in Texas is how the Green New Deal does not work.
Exactly.
And so we need more of it. I mean, I was out here in Brookfield, so come out here and ride around and see all the solar panels they have put up, Joe, because Chris Baker is, he's really a rhino and Democrat opposite. They've been putting up solar panels out here. This is the madness of it, Joe. They cut down the trees, they take carbon dioxide and put it up in them, right? They put up solar panels, so they're actually destroying the ecology. And the thing about solar panels is we've had that listening here. We've had snowstorms every week. Guess what? They have been covered with snow and ice since the beginning of December. No one comes out to clean them off. They don't even work in a place like New England and, the Midwest where they get winter snow and ice all
Right.
year long.
Right.
Even work. And of course we saw the wind turbines, they don't work either if they ice up. So it's really awful. But out here, it's like they decapitated rocks and mountains and put up these gigantic flat solar panels. They have been covered with snow and ice for the beginning of December. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does. What did you say that the turbines in Massachusetts out your way have been freezing all along?
No, I said we saw it in
Right, okay, I thought you said something about, yeah. Well, look, Joanne, the bottom line is on this, like I'm saying, I think you're saying the same thing, is this is not, wind and solar cannot replace fossil fuels overnight. And you gotta look at it in this way, come from the other direction. If 4%, 10%, 12% of the energy need can be absorbed by solar and wind, fantastic, that's wonderful. It's a little less pressure off of that. But for reliability and expense, right? Nothing's cheaper than the fossil fuels. And not just the monetary, like the expense of the solar panels and the wind turbines and all that, Joanne, the expense to the ecosystem. People, this whole part of it, they don't talk about. The materials for solar panels that they have to go, and then disposing of this. And a lot of these materials, right, they don't talk about the human cost of children's and mines to mine this material. And they don't talk about the fact that this stuff is typically put together and built outside of the country. And how do we dispose, like China, how do we dispose of the equipment, right? There's all of these questions that they don't bring up. Yeah. Yeah. No, there isn't, right? Right, we just keep producing this stuff. The planet is producing a form of energy, naturally, for us. And I look at that and I say, isn't there an argument that this is what we're supposed to use? And now our technology has improved on coal and burning cleaner coal, and it's not as dirty as it used to be. And there's a lot of issues to talk about that, but I'm against the clock, Joanne, and we're going to have Mark Mix join us from Right to Work at 7 o'clock. So you can call back later in the show, but I got to break it now because, folks, thank you, Joanne. We're going to take a break for 7 o'clock. We'll come back with hour 2 of the Saturday edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show. Stick with us, 508-871-7000. Hey Mark, Joe Mangiacotti at WCRN. You're scheduled for 7 o'clock this morning. I just wanted to give you a call before the producer did to talk to you for a minute, but he'll be calling you back shortly to get you on. You're on next out of the 7 o'clock break. You can also call the station at 508-871-7000. Thanks, Mark. Let me try backup number. He didn't answer the first number. I'm trying the backup. Oh, that might be him. All right.
Yes, he did. In fact, he just got off the phone.
Just tell him I was going to talk to him, but that's fine. I'll catch him on air. I was going to talk to him before we went on, but that's okay. I'll catch him on air. Unless you know how to put it through the board without going on air. No, all right.
seconds.
All right, folks, welcome back to the second hour of the Saturday edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show. WCRN AM 830, our affiliates, live streaming on the TuneIn app. Tell Alexa to play WCRN, she'll do that. Also, live streaming on social media on our Facebook page at Joe Mangi Show, M-A-N-G-I. That's our handle for all our social media, Joe Mangi Show. 508-871-7000 to join the conversation. Our text line is up and running, 617-297-8388. Just a couple quick things. Yes, that was Hurricane Sandy that I was searching for. Hurricane Sandy that caused all the havoc down there. Thank you to text 873. Thank you very much. Irene for Vermont in 2011, and Andrew was the one that was in 92 in Florida for the natural stuff. And a lot of comments on the Texas situation and so forth, so thank you for those. It was Diane Feinstein from San Francisco that had the Chinese driver agent, sleeper agent there. And according to you texters, the Parler app on the iPhone is still dead. So I guess that means if you have an iPhone, they're still blocking it. I have a Droid, so my Parler app does work, but I had downloaded it before Amazon wiped them off and before they took it off of the Google Play or iPhone store. I think you can go to their website and log in if you have an iPhone, but not from the iPhone. Thank you, texters. Always helpful on the text line. You people are excellent that way. 508-871-7000 to join the conversation. As promised, Mark Mix is going to join us. He's the president of National Right to Work. He's also served as president of National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation, environmental activists. Were only temporarily satisfied when Joe Biden signed an order rescinding the Keystone XL pipeline. And we talked about this, but let me invite into the conversation Mark Mix. Good morning, Mark. Thank you for getting up early on a Saturday and joining us.
Well, Joe, thank you. Sounds like you got good people to jump into on Saturday. So help keep you straight.
Yeah, we do. Saturday and Sunday mornings. The Saturday has been, we're like in our 14th year in Saturday mornings. We added Sundays a couple of years ago. But yeah, we do have quite a followership on there, early on the weekend mornings. And I look forward to them every weekend morning. Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, Mark, you know, first of all, I'm going to ask you to give the listeners a brief background of yourself in a second. But, you know, one of the first things that President Biden did was kill this Keystone Pipeline deal. With it, thousands of jobs. I mean, it's not like the oil stops being produced and pumped. It's just a matter of, is it going to go to other nations instead of here? It's still going to be brought down here through trucks, but mostly railway. Warren Buffett's very happy about that. But the amount of jobs being lost is a huge blow. And I got to do the eye roll when I hear people say, well, they were temporary jobs. Well, technically all jobs are temporary. But when you have a temporary job that you can put your kids through college in that amount of time, that's nothing to take lightly. So first of all, you know, tell people just a little bit about yourself so they understand where you're coming from, your background, and where you glean your expertise in this particular area from.
So Well, Joe, thanks for the opportunity.
That's awesome.
I grew up in a union household. My stepfather was 30 years So yeah, I grew up in an environment where my mentor in high school was basically people that were extremely good. I didn't realize at the time what it sounded really, really, really good. And it wasn't until I got out of it, small town, and got out of the world, that I started to kind of understand how the world worked, that things started to make sense. And working at this great manufacturing plant for 98, grocery store, and did those things that most American people do when they grow up and try to another table. I'm now married and have 6 kids. That's my primary occupation, taking care of them.
6 kids.
Yeah.
Wow, Mark, good for you. Wow. Pregnancy.
Now, it's helping American workers in their ability to exercise their right to work.
Yeah.
Right to work, really, thankfully, it's very, very simple. They have the right to join the union and participate in a huge union bill. There's no need to operate in associated practice or private organizations. Coming up, that's where I am and where we are.
And the thing about this is, and I'm so glad that SCOTUS finally, I think it was back in 2018, the decision saying that, unions can no longer extract, which is, that's a nice way of putting it, by the way, Mark, but extract union dues. And what we see happen, and we see with the teachers union, and right now I think it's being illustrated to us because we see these powerful teachers unions in certain large cities saying, not only are we not going to go back to work when CDC says that you can, but they've imposed things that aren't connected to COVID at all, right? I mean, we have school systems who've actually said we need to defund the police or to remove our resource officer before we go back to work. Now, the teachers unions hold a lot of power, but it's to me it's just a money laundering charade going on. They would pull these union dues, then the unions would put that money back out to politicians, and then they tell the politicians, you got to send money to us at the school systems because we can control your votes, and they're getting teachers to pay them and then use that money for candidates they might not want to support. Now, if you do something, and I'm encouraging people to do this, go to Google and in Google, teachers, union, extortion, fraud, and see what cities come up. There's a large number of superintendents and school officials in large cities who have gone to prison or been on house arrest for embezzlement and misuse of funds. So when we look at this, in what was the case, Jonas versus AFSCME or something, right? That was the one that said they can't take it out and force you to pay union dues, correct?
Yeah, that's right, Joe. That was a case we litigated on behalf of a worker in Illinois who was taken to the certain case and all the way up to the Supreme Court in 2018, Supreme Court ruled in Mark Cannon's favor that said that no government employee anywhere in America, local government, Ohio government, state government, can be compelled to pay one union fee to get a job and work for the government, which is a huge victory for the workers.
Sure.
Doesn't stop anyone from doing it, doesn't stop anyone from participating in it, if they choose to do so. But it gives workers, rank and file workers that serve our government, the opportunity to hold their union bills accountable. And that's what we're talking about. Once they have compulsion, they can extract, straight workers, by the way, that money from individual or additional employment. It takes all accountability away from rank and file workers. So right now, across the nation, we have a national right protocol for every government employee in the country, and we make huge steps forward. But there's still work to be done because there's people not correcting
Well, thank you on that. It's, when you get down to it, it's really a disgusting system when you look at what's happening to it. And now we just, I mean, the timing on this, Mark, right? We had this California school board meeting being conducted, I don't know, I don't think it was Zoom, it was one of those UMAX or whatever, that they were holding the meeting, and they thought it was a closed meeting. And you know, this last year, the number of people who have learned the rule of a hot mic, and you know, at 35 years doing this, and what was drilled into my head day one in this business, Mark, is there's no such thing as a dead microphone. If you're in a room and there's a microphone, and nowadays cameras are everywhere, right? Every phone is a camera, they're all over the place. Assume that it is recording or live at all times. And so now we listen to these members of the school board talking, and they think that they're in a closed loop now. And what do they say? They say, you know, don't come at me to go back to school, I'll take you down. That's just me. That these parents, you know, some choice words for calling them names, and saying all they're interested in is getting back their babysitters for their kids. Now that one there was mind-blowing to me, because my thought on that, Mark, is, okay, so you view yourself as a baby, you're the most expensive babysitter in the history of babysitting. If that's what you think you are, I think we should pay you babysitter wages. Because if that's what you think your job is, man, that was numbfied. It was unbelievable to hear this talk. I think the president of the board has resigned already. Parents are expecting more on that. But that leads me to wonder, are teachers, unions, I mean, what do they think about parents? We got a glimpse of what they think about parents. And
Well, yeah, it's really where the only accountability comes in. And this Al Shank, the former president of the he was in an interview, and a very moment in Canada, someone asked him about kids, and he said, look, kids start paying you, they'll start looking at kids. And that's kind of the mindset of the teachers union monopoly, that take over the government.
Mhm.
And what we find is these old like people, they think they're more powerful, they know better than their parents, and their parents' kids, and it's this new monopoly power that is given this people before.
Sure.
So out in Los Angeles, the guy from Los Angeles said, look, we're not coming back to class because you want to leave. What's that got to do with service?
Yeah, absolutely. Or a lot of what they're demanding has nothing to do with it. Now, we had, what, $126 billion allocated. They've used, no, it was 128, and now we've got $121 billion that the first COVID package has assigned for reopening schools. What the heck have they done with that money? If you haven't used it, either give it back or open the schools. Now, the CDC has come out and said it's okay to open schools, it's not a dangerous thing. If these teachers who are saying, I'm not going back until, you know, they said, the union said, you gotta put us at the top of the vaccine list, and they're saying we're still not coming back. Well, if you've gone to the grocery store or the pharmacy, or you go to your friend's house, that argument's gone. I mean, if you've left your house in the last 8 months, and you're refusing to go back to school, I think you don't have a leg to stand on in that argument. But can the unions hold the nation up forever?
Well, they're going to try, and with separation of union leadership, so often from the rank of teachers, those that want to go back in the classroom, have great teachers, and they take pride in their leaders and education. That divide between union officials and their so-called members is going wider and wider and wider. Not really. So pipeline, you mentioned that.
yeah, let's focus on that, because I think there's a gap between the rank and file teacher in the so-called leadership here. And it has to be frustrating for, I think that it's probably a good percentage, a large number of teachers who teach for the right reasons. And they really want to be in class, because the other cost of this situation, Mark, that I think we're seeing is the expense to the students, and funny that you say that about it in a moment of candor, you know, when students start paying the union fees, we'll worry about them. But meanwhile, we have a generation of students who have fallen behind. And how do you fix that, right? That ripple effect is going to carry through for their entire scholastic career. While the rest of the planet gets back to school, America is going to be behind. Plus we have student suicide deaths, suicide rate is up, and depression is up, and hospital visits are up. I mean, there is a human cost going on, not just plexiglass and sanitizer here. And these rank and file teachers, what mechanism do they have to say, enough, I'll go to school, I'll teach? And for those teachers that are more up there in age, elderly, they may have the option of getting behind a camera and going to multiple classrooms and multiple screens in homes, whatever it is. But we've got to do something. So what does the rank and file teacher have to force the hand of the union to do the right thing, or do they have any power?
Well, because of the jam, they can stop spending money from the minimum compensation.
There you go.
The accountable aspect of what happened here, it's like the bakery, Joe, you know, the bakery says that we're the only game in town, the only place you can get your croissant is at our bakery. And if you want it, here it is, but you gotta pay for it. Well, accidentally, that bakery has no incentive to provide a great croissant, soft croissant, warm croissant, because they're the only game in town. And union officials have positioned themselves in many cases to be the sole voice in the educational process when it comes to dealing with school boards and elected officials. So they have this monopoly bargaining service that is something that unions embrace and hold on to with all their might, and it gives them the sole voice in the workplace. But if you withhold your money, then you can hold them accountable. It's funny, Joe, the big FDR promise to help the right labor policy in terms of the Railway Labor Act and the so-called National Industrial Recovery Act, the AGs Report. We talked about this. He was a big fan of unions, but what he said was the only way that grandfather workers can hold unions accountable is if union is involuntary. And workers can choose whether or not to support the leadership and lead them down the path that leads to the kinds of things you're talking about in the school system, the unemployment line, the pipeline. That's the only way we can hold them accountable, is make sure that the worker has a choice and can support or not support the leadership or person.
Yeah. So again, it comes back to the money. And that's the tool they have, is to say not to do. Now, let me ask you, are there ramifications to the educator who says, you know, what is the union doing for me, really? I'm not going to participate. I'm not going to pay the dues. I don't like the candidates that you back. I don't like what you're doing as an organization. Are there ramifications? Are there school systems that you can't teach in if you don't belong to the union, or does that fall under the SCOTUS rule?
Well, it does acknowledge that unions have significant influence power inside a government system, i.e. schools. But there's a lot more choice in school unions. You can quite pay up to 100% job. But as I say, what that means, and eventually the power of student representation,
Yeah. Yeah. Huh. Yeah. Well, with I mean, there's the Keystone Pipeline, but there are other, right, Dakota Access Pipeline, there are other pipelines out there, and they all seem to be at risk as well. And are we gonna see jobs go away and jobs leave, get transferred outside of the country again? Because Biden seems to be undoing the policies of the Trump administration that brought us the lowest unemployment ever, and the lowest unemployment for not just women, Latinos, and blacks, but also for the blue collar worker. It was the first time that we saw wages for high school graduates and even high school dropouts actually increase, and opportunity existing across the nation for that segment of the earning sphere, those people there, and that blue collar, lower income was actually rising faster than the upper. So what's gonna happen when all of this stuff is getting canceled and all these union jobs and jobs period are going away, Mark?
Well, I mean, that's a great question. I think we know. It's interesting, studying this recently, and what they track is the jobs that come back to the United States, manufacturing jobs, jobs that Scranton Joe talked about.
Scranton Joe, opposed to the other Joe that's up there, yeah, I know. Notice how there's a couple different Joe Bidens?
Well, you know, over the last decade, 59% of the jobs that came back, the resource jobs came back to the 2017 job, right? Just like the private sector, they did it over unfortunately, the energy policy that Biden
Yeah. Hey, Mark, you know, and President Trump told us right before, right, that Joe Biden, your jobs will be gone. They'll be gone. He warned them, which is why I think very suspicious about the election out of Pennsylvania, because those people were told what's going to happen, and that's exactly what's going on. And they seem that they just want to take their jobs away. They just want to end all oil pipelines in the United States as well, and that's going to be tons of jobs. But we're coming up against the clock. So people, first of all, the website is nrtw.org, National Right to Work, NRTW. Now they can also follow you on Facebook at National Right to Work Foundation, all one word. Yeah, all right, and on Twitter, it's just Right to Work. I'll put up those links on our social media platforms, so on our Facebook page, folks, those are over there, the Twitter, it's on there. Go check out Mark and everyone else at NRTW. You have some cases up there. There was something about Orr. We heard this guy in the news before, right? Peter, was it Peter Orr? Who you know, acting general counsel. So there's a lot of news on there. But we're going to take a break. Mark, did you have more? Did you want to stay through the break, or are you good for this morning? All right, it's fine. Okay, folks, so Mark's going to stick with us for a little while. We're going to take a quick break here. It's time for handling change. We'll check in with that. We'll come back on the other side. 508-871-7000. Lines are open and available. 508-871-7000. If you have questions for Mark or you just have something you need us to talk about, join it. 617-297-8388 for our text line. I'm Joe Mangiacotti. We'll be back in just a moment. See the phone for a second?
Yeah, okay, hold on just one second. Hey, Mark, Joe. Coming back, I'm not policy. Well, we wanted to confirm that the board, but, talk a little bit about what's going on there. Well, the fee, and then, the grade, with the inside, the job and the end result, and how that's going to be done. Green, how fast it's going to go, how it's going to go.
an inspection, an appraisal, you getting financing for that property, and the dates and timelines are very clear in that contract, so you know what you're expected of.
Well, that's fantastic. That sounds like there's a good few topics for us to delve into in another edition of Handling Change. But that will wrap it up for this edition of Handling Change with Gary Gay from Platinum Rock Realty. Thank you for stopping by the studios again, Gary.
Thanks for having me, as always, Joe, and I do really enjoy educating our listeners.
Absolutely. And thank you for joining us for Handling Change. From the Cantiani Insurance Studios, join us here each week at 7:30 as we give you the tools to handle the changes in your life. Visit us at handlingchange.info, and you can find Gary and all his team at platinumrockrealty.com. And you can call Gary directly at 413-427-5506. For Gary, I'm Joe Mangiacotti.
To join the conversation, call 508-871-7000. That's 508-871-7000. Now, here's your host, Joe Mangiacotti.
All right, folks, welcome back here to the final segment, actually, the Joe Mangiacotti Show Saturday edition. Our lines are open and available at 508-871-7000, 508-871-7000. Our text line at 617-297-8388. We are, of course, on AM 830 WCRN, our affiliates, as well as live streaming in the TuneIn app. Just punch in WCRN, and you can take us anywhere. And Alexa, just say, hey, Alexa, play WCRN. She'll do that. We're also live streaming on our Facebook page, Joe Mangi Show, M-A-N-G-I, Joe Mangi Show. That's actually for all of our social media platforms. And thank you. The audio issue on the streaming has been fixed. I guess you guys were hearing kind of me just in the studio and not what was going out over the air. So sorry about that. That's been corrected, so we're all good there. All right, online with us, our guest today is Mark Mix, who is president of National Right to Work Committee. He also served as the president of the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation. And in a nutshell, Mark, you fight for the rights of employees, and you were instrumental, your organization, in the SCOTUS decision a couple of years ago that said that unions can't extract this money, can't force you to pay these dues into unions. And this has always been an issue in this country because, the Supreme Court a while ago, years ago, right, they said, hey, corporations can donate. Corporations are an entity. They have a right to free speech. They, therefore, can donate. And my thought on that, and I was doing talk radio, I've been doing talk radio for 30-plus years, I've always said, look, if unions can donate, then companies can donate. If you don't want businesses to be able to donate, then why do unions get to donate? That if everybody has it, everybody has it. But I think one of the problems we have today is some of these major corporations in the country are worse than the teachers' unions and some of these other unions when it comes to politics. And how much politics and supporting politicians and influencing politicians play in the role of the union. I mean, this is something that we can't unring this bell, Mark. I mean, how can we ever untangle a union that's supposed to fight for, I mean, hey, unions, right? They were necessary at one point in the development of this country, correct? I mean, if it wasn't for unions, would we have 8-hour work days, 40-hour work weeks? Although Henry Ford had a lot to do with that, right? Because he wanted 3 shifts. I mean, but that's true, right? Henry Ford wanted 24 hours a day, so he came up with the 8-hour work day, so he could have 3 shifts of 8 hours. If it wasn't for Henry Ford, we wouldn't have the 8-hour work day. Not, and the unions didn't do that, right? It was Ford who did that, actually. But we had, I mean, the union played a big role in the safety and the way that employees were treated at one point. Is that still their role? Hasn't OSHA and government agencies kind of taken that role over?
Well, Joe, that's right. I mean, the government has stepped in and they have taken care of a lot of the workplace issues that the unions in years gone by had promoted. But look, here's the thing. There was a place for unions in America. There is a place for unions in America. And there will be a place for unions in America. I mean, if workers want to join together voluntarily to amplify their voice, they should be able to do that. And that federal law and state law protects that. But there's no place for compulsion and forced unionism in America.
Right.
You know, it was Samuel Gompers, who's labeled the father of the American labor movement, in his last speech to the AFL in El Paso, Texas in 1924. He realized that the delegates of the AFL were trying to go to government to get them to give them power by government decree. And he urged the delegates of that convention, before he passed away, that the workers of America adhere to voluntary institutions. Anything else is a menace to their rights. And so what happened, unfortunately, during the New Deal and FDR, the federal government stepped in. They took over labor management relations in the private sector, brought it back to Washington, created a National Labor Relations Board, created a federal labor policy that was imposed across the country, and now the unions are wards of government action, whether it be in Massachusetts or California or New York or in Washington, D.C. Union officials have to be involved in politics because their power is a derivative of government action. Instead of being out there as a private organization and providing services that attract people, attract customers, if you will, to support them financially and associationally, they have decided to use government power. And when you use government power, once you have it, you don't want to give it up. And as that famous politician or philosopher said, all power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's what's happened here, Joe, with this government action that gives this select group of union officials power over the livelihoods of workers in 23 states, at least at this point, that don't have right to work laws, where you can be fired from your job for not paying a private organization for the privilege of working.
Absolutely. Mark, I thought that I'd bring up something. Right? We're watching some horrific stuff going on in Texas right now, and people, I think, might be finding out for the first time that Texas actually is off the grid, power grid, of the United States, right? They have this EROC, or the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, or I guess ERCOT is how they go by, right? That's the acronym there. And which manages 75% of the Lone Star's electric grid. Now, there are some places in Texas that are on the national grid, and they do get power, from neighboring states and things of that nature. But this is, we're seeing a breakdown going on in there, and every time the discussion comes up about energy, other than the fact that we can't flip a switch. And tonight we're going to go from fossil fuels to what they deem green energy. Although solar isn't that green when you look at the materials that you have to pull out of the earth to make the solar panels, and then what you do with spent solar panels. They're very toxic to the environment. We have to dispose of windmills or turbines eventually. So they're not as green as they pretend to be. Electric cars aren't as green, right? Where did the electricity come from? Unless you hooked it up to electricity coming from a windmill or solar power, it probably came from fossil fuel. But other than the breakdown in the argument about clean energy, I always think about the jobs that are going away, the jobs that are going to be affected by this. And for certain politicians to say, very cavalierly, by the way, just amplifying how out of touch they are with blue-collar workers, but just American citizens in general. Well, just get another job. Just go build a solar panel. Just go get another job like it's nothing. And these are good jobs in the fossil fuel industry, aren't they, Mark? We're talking people who work building pipelines and oil refineries and trucking this stuff. Those are good jobs, good wages that you can raise a family on.
Yeah, Joe, and here lies a conflict inside of at least the Democrat Party at this point. You have these environmentalists, and of course I'm an environmentalist too, and I think you probably are, Joe. That term has been kind of co-opted by the extreme left, and inside of their party, inside of Joe Biden's party, inside of Joe Biden's policy advisors, there is a huge conflict, and that conflict is exactly as you articulate here. This idea of so-called sustainable power, which I think in Texas, and I'm getting off my expertise here and chat with you as a private citizen about the Texas power grid and how they're receiving power. But on one hand, you have these extremists that are saying, we've got to get rid of fossil fuel. John Kerry, your former guy there, and he says that, in 9 years, it's all going to be over unless he continues to get to fly in his private jet across the country. But on the other hand, you have workers, just to your point.
There.
Yeah, right. And to your point, on the other side of the coin, you have these rank and file workers who are subjected to compulsory unionism, forced unionism, where their union officials are right there with Joe Biden in the White House talking about how they can expand their power, but yet the conflict there is pretty evident. You're either gonna put these people out of work, or you're gonna upset the extreme radical left of the party. And I'm not sure which way, or I'm not sure Joe Biden knows which way he's going to go. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Well, Mark, first of all, I'm not quite sure. Just my opinion, folks. But hey, that's why you tune in to the show every weekend, is to hear my opinion. And my opinion is, I don't think Joe Biden's calling all the shots. To be perfectly honest with you, and I think that he's being pulled in one direction. The extreme left has been wanting him to go totally radical with his policies and so forth, and he does know, and people around him know, that he can't do that quite as much as they want. However, he has undone so many of the policies. I mean, we joined the Paris Climate Accord again. He's doing these pipelines, doing this over again. Now, as far as the Texas situation goes, I think that they have to re-examine whether or not they want to be isolated from the national power grid. That might be common sense. A solution here is look at that and say, well, maybe it's time that we. I didn't realize we have phone calls actually. So let me. Do you mind taking a call, Mark?
No problem.
All right. Sorry, folks. I got off. I didn't realize. Sorry, Russ. 508-871-7000. We've got full lines. Let me jump to the phones first. Mark, welcome back. You're on the phone with Mark Mix from the National Right to Work. Oh, what happened?
Joe.
Yep. Who's on?
Hey, good morning, Joe. It's Tyler and
Oh,
Westfield.
did we lose Mark? All right, go ahead. Well, you try to get Mark back on the line. Tyler, what's on your mind?
I definitely was hoping to get Mark's opinion on this.
All right, we're working to get him back on. That might be him ringing in, so we'll see.
Okay, well, Joe, wait 1 second before I ask Mark a question. Joe, you're 100% right about Texas. I read the Texas Tribune for years. The independent companies that are not regulated were warned, hey, man, you don't have the upgraded equipment to handle cold weather. So the independent, privately owned companies chose not to spend the money. Combined with not being on the grid, it is a catastrophic situation. And you got to remember, these people do not want to spend a drop of that money from their bucket of billions. And the climate changes we've witnessed, what you call Arctic inversions, it's snowing in Hawaii, and 70 in Westfield, Mass. These are signs that have been going on now for almost a decade. They have to recognize the symptoms and prepare, because this can't happen again in a state like Texas.
Well, 100 years ago they had this kind of snow snap. So, once in a great while this is going to happen. Back when they were, building these wind turbines, and somebody said, "Oh yeah, we should winterize them." You're right. Somebody along there said, "No, we're Texas. Why are we going to spend that kind of money?" A little short-sighted. In retrospect, I'm sure they're thinking, "Boy, wouldn't that be nice if we?" And whatever, I have no idea what the cost is, but in the big picture of it, it's worth it today, wouldn't it have been? Absolutely, it would have been worth whatever it costs to do. My point on this, Tyler, is that we cannot flip a switch, folks, and just get off. And Joe Biden's been kind of doing the get rid of these jobs because there's going to be Green New Deal, and green jobs down the road. Well, we don't have those. We got to remember, since the beginning of the infrastructure as we know it today began, it was fossil fuels that powered it. People like Henry Ford actually wanted to build electric cars initially, but
they did.
But the tycoons at the time, Tyler, right, the J.P. Morgans and the Gettys of the world said, "No, I have all this petroleum stuff. I want it all done on this," and they kind of killed the electric car. So we have 127 years of innovation in the combustion engine. Now, if we have had 127 years of perfecting the electric car in the battery, because really, right, when it comes to electric cars, it's not the motor as much as it is the battery. And batteries are not very green. The lithium in there, right? What do you do with? Think about what you do with old batteries, or what happens to a battery. Like, we've all had flashlights, folks, or most of us at one point have those power tools that are electric batteries, and we know that after a certain amount of time, the torque in that electric drill that's powered by battery loses some of its oomph. So, and we know that eventually all of these massive batteries in these electric vehicles are going to have to be disposed of. And that's a toxic situation. And I mean it in a literal toxic situation because of the toxic material. So they're not as, again, electric cars aren't as green as, people want us to believe that they're green. So what I'm saying is we've had 127 years to work on the combustion engine. And what do we have? Well, we have engines that burn cleaner and more efficient today because there's been regulations put in place over the years to tell the motor companies you need to do that. Well, now we need to give ample amount of time for them to do the same thing, but with the battery and the electric engines. I mean, Tesla was in business for, 6 years before they sold their first car? Yeah. So we have these things, but I think Mark is back with us? All right, 1 minute. I guess he's going to be back with us.
Hey, Joe.
Yeah.
The first cars were electric.
They were.
You're 100% right. If you,
I think we lost Tyler though. Yeah, you dumped Tyler when we did that. Mark, are you there?
I'm here. I got it. Yeah, I'm back. Yeah.
I think Tyler's calling back, but what we'll do is you can get Tyler on the phone, but bring Joe in from Worcester who wants to talk to Mark too. So Joe, let's not lose anyone. Mark Mix is with us. We're going to be joined by Joe from Worcester, who's calling in as well. And you lost Mark again.
Hello.
Hey, Joe, how are you? I think, Russ, we're having a keeping people on the line issue. Is that it? All right. So we're having just some phone issues. I think it's just well, whatever. Joe, what's on your mind?
What I was going to say is I know there's a stance or a feeling where there shouldn't be government regulation, whether it be state or federal, but maybe the weaknesses of the power grid in the state of Texas have exposed the fact that lack of proper regulation in terms of insulation and natural gas lines, lack of proper regulation of the grid in the state of Texas have exposed the weaknesses when there is limited regulation of businesses in terms of the power grid of Texas, quite frankly. I realize that in New England we have probably a better regulation of our power grid, and we have reliance upon many sources. But this deep freeze that's caused grave adversities for many people. I mean, children have died, elderly men have died, and it has exposed the weakness where lack of regulation in terms of having.
So I see what you're saying, Joe. You're saying that the lack of regulation may be contributing to this breakdown of the items. Now, that might be the case, but I also think that even if you want to have your own independent grid, why are you divorced from the rest of it? You should have the option for these situations to be able to pull and buy power from other grids. I mean, that's how things work. I don't know if people understand this, but we broker energy every day, right? So Massachusetts will buy energy off the grid if we have a surge or a need to it. And that happens in the winter, but it also happens in the summer, air conditioner use up and so forth. But I think down in Texas, Joe, they were very short-sighted not to invest in the technology of de-icing. And it's good, again, I think it's just solid policy to have all of this other multiple, let's put it this way, to have multiple sources of energy, but you're never, at this point anyway, with the technology we have today, where you are not going to find as reliable and cheap fuel and power than you are from fossil fuels. It's just that's just the fact right now.
I agree. I mean, we need. I drive a gasoline-powered engine. I would never buy a hybrid. I would never buy an electric vehicle. I've bought gas vehicles since the 70s, my first car. I am a firm believer in petroleum products. I realize the necessity of natural gas. The rental property is owned was heated by natural gas. My condo in which I live is heated by natural gas. I'm a firm believer in petroleum products. Firm believer. And I see diesel trucks driving down the roads when I drive across the state, whether it's either my job in Framingham or to the New Hampshire border for my weekday job. Firm believer in petroleum products. I don't think we should have this situation where, granted, we need to be environmentally sound in our policies. We don't want to go back to the policies of the 60s when you had factories in Worcester polluting the environment, when you didn't have the policies, Nixon and the Environmental Protection Agency regulating the purity of the water or the air.
Right. And back, come on, Joe, back in the day, they dumped everything in the Merrimack River, the Blackstone River, right, the Charles River. I mean, it was disgusting. And these factories just used it as the toilet and dumped all kinds of waste, not just toxic waste, but actual items. I mean, if you ever dredged the bottom of these lakes and these rivers, it would be amazing what you'd find. But I think we have Mark Mix back on, right, Russ? Okay. So without dropping anyone, can we have Mark join the conversation? I guess you dropped Joe. So are you going to be able to pull Mark and Tyler in at the same time without losing somebody? All right. Let me try this, and Mark went away. Tyler, you're back on, right?
Yes, sir. Well, Mark can hear me. I'll ask the question.
Well, I don't know if he can hear because the call dropped again. So I don't know if this is, we're running against the clock, but in case he's listening on streaming, ask the question and I'll write it down and we'll do our best to have him circle back to it.
This is simple. Joe made a very good point. You can't just flip a switch, take a major portion of the economy and remove it without extreme economic repercussions. So the 5.0 technology designed to replace humans in the next 3 to 5 years at what you call the lower end jobs where you have fast food workers, for example. You cannot take away the bread that holds the sauce and the cheese of the economy. If you eliminate what you call menial or lesser skilled jobs, fast food, this is going to take away a major portion of economic activity, which undermines and does not distribute the wealth evenly. You'll have massive unemployment. What's going to replace their contribution and their spending in the economy if they're replaced by some robots? That's a major factor you got to be aware of.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Now we have Mark back on. No? All right. I thought he was calling back. I know he just texted me. I'm sorry for the phone things. Yeah, we got 2 minutes anyway. But I think Mark might be listening. We'll see if we can follow up with that. You know, Tyler, I'll be honest with you. I just lost my train of thought between me talking about getting the phone straightened out and what we were talking about. The robots. Thank you. Yes, now, robots. Okay, that is we have like a minute and a half. We've talked about this on the show. I will do it. I will be happy to do an entire segment or two on robots, because if you think that's a futuristic thing, you're totally wrong on that, folks. Let me tell you, there are acres and acres of factories and warehouses where robots are doing jobs that used to be done by humans, and it goes everything from picking orders in warehouses to assembling items, and they're actually doing things that you would be amazed. Between robots and IA, artificial intelligence has come leaps and bounds in recent times. And it was Andrew, he ran for President Andrew Yang, who was behind the universal basic income. Most of that is based on the idea that the robots are going to replace all kinds of, even truck driving jobs. That we're going to get to a point where trucks are going to drive across the nation totally automated. But we're against the clock. I'm coming up for the end of the show, Tyler. I'm sorry about that.
Thank you.
I'll be back tomorrow morning, folks. Thank you, Tyler. Be back tomorrow morning, 6 to 8 a.m. for the Sunday edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show. So tune in and join me there. We'll continue with some of this and some new stuff tomorrow morning. And I will talk to Mark Mix and make my apologies, folks. But you have a great remainder of Saturday, and I'll see you back here tomorrow morning. I'm Joe Mangiacotti.